Hi everyone, it's Ollie from MagicHands Hobbies again. Welcome to my latest series, Trust in the Wash. This is dedicated to HeroQuest, and we're looking at doors today. Now you can see that I've got the doors here. They're already primed, although the primer that I used was not a very good one. It was cheap. It does not pay to go cheap. It was supposed to be satin, and it looks more like gloss, but anyway, it's still an undercoat or prime. So let's crack on and talk about a simple way to paint these doors. This is what we're aiming to produce. It's a very simple concept, mainly involving dry brushing, and hopefully you'll enjoy this as much as I did, except for them vines. Those vines were a nightmare. Anyway, these are the colours that we're going to be looking at using. Obviously you don't have to use those exact ones, and you can use any kind of proxy or any colour combination that you feel is appropriate. And we're simply going to select a dry brush. This dry brush is actually a makeup brush that I bought from a local superstore, and we are going to liberally coat the model in this base dark, it's like a dark muddy brown, I suppose. We're not focused too much on having a dry brush. This is more of a, I suppose, a wet brush, I think the technique is called. We're applying the colour over the top, but we're not trying to get into all the cracks and crevices. We're just brushing over the top of the surface, similar to a dry brush but more paint. This is just to establish a base coat. This will be applied all over the model, including the bit at the top, which I actually end up deciding to paint metal. I was going to do it as stone. I've seen quite a few people do it as stone. So one thing I will say here is that whilst this is a series called Trust in the Wash, the furniture and doors I'm actually doing more of a dry brush. There's very little, if any, wash involved at all. So apologies if anyone thinks this is a clickbait title. In either case, I'm going to keep all the HeroQuest paint videos, tutorials together, and I will most likely just expand the Trust in the Wash to cover other board games and other miniatures in the future. Right, so now we're moving on to the mid-tone. This time with a bit less paint on. This is more like a dry brush, but still not quite there. Dry brushes, the technique will tend to produce like a dry effect. That's what we want to finish with, but in this particular case, because there are so many doors for the HeroQuest set, I'm not expecting it to be that straight away. I want to put the base colours down and whip through these models really quickly, or at least as quick as I can. You can obviously take more time over it, but whilst this is a big feature of the game, it's not a main concern of mine, so I'm just literally just knocking the colour on there, and I'll worry about the overall effect closer to the end. Okay, so now we're more of a dry brush. You can see my technique has slightly changed, and I'm just trying to catch the upper edges of the stonework. I'm using the lighter highlight tone, and I'm working down. My brushwork and my strokes are moving from top to bottom, trying to catch the upper edges of all of the stonework and all those little intricate details. Don't forget the floor. Obviously light does reflect onto the floor, and it does produce a highlight as well, so we need to put some on the base there. Be careful not to have too much paint on your brush at this point, because if you do, you'll undo the work that you've done underneath. Right, so now we're going to move on to the main door itself, and we're going to apply a base coat of brown. It's a very thin colour. I should have put 2 layers on here, but at the same time we're going to be putting wash over it. The wash is going to do the majority of the work here, so it's not that big a deal. As you can see, you can still see that it's quite translucent. I'm putting the ink over, sorry, not the ink, I'm putting the wash over the top. The wash is going to stain the colour, and it's almost going to fill in those imperfections, as well as go down into the cracks and crevices. Getting some gunmetal, and we're going to coat the keystone at the top of the arch. This will also be used, the same colour will be used to colour the hinges and the doorknob or door handle. Not entirely sure how you would call that one. The ring on the door. Okay, moving on to a lighter brown, leather brown, and we're going to use dry brushing technique again over the top of the door, but this time we're doing it horizontally. You can see the wood grain is going vertically, and so we want to brush horizontally. If we were to go vertically, it would actually paint into the gaps, and it would effectively eliminate everything that we've done so far. So we're catching the edges, catching the highlights, and producing a lighter tone, still leaving shadowy areas where the brush doesn't reach. Now we don't want to try and catch those areas, we want to leave some shadows which the raised areas of the metalwork on the door will actually automatically create. This is effectively the mid-tone. We're also going to apply a lighter highlight colour on top of this. Here comes the lighter colour now. By the way, make sure that between each one of these coats you allow it to dry. Now you can see there I had too much paint on the brush. I had to go back. I still have too much paint on the brush. So when I was moving the brush away, that was me wiping some of the excess paint away. There are so many of these doors in the HeroQuest set that if you make a mistake on one, it's not that big a deal, and you can always go back and start again from the base coat, or even maybe the next tone down, the mid-tone. Now we're going to apply the metallic onto the metal work. I do forget about the studs in the door, but I'd rather forget about them than attempt to paint them and end up getting more paint on top of the wood, and all that effort that we put in would be wasted. On hindsight, I'm glad I left them. So now we're going to start applying the washes. First of all, the black wash. The aim here is just coat the metal, don't let it pool too much. If you do get anything pooling, just get a dry brush and just dip the bristles into it and it will soak it up like a sponge. You'll notice that with the black wash on the hinges, I'm allowing it to just flow over the edges, and this creates like a false shadow and just makes the hinges pop a bit more from the detail of the door itself and the timber. So now we're going to put on the brown wash. You don't have to use the Citadel colours for this. You can use any brown wash that you've got, or if you want to use a wash medium. And the idea here is I'm just coating it over the top. This is going to give it a different tint to the silver, almost as if it's stained, almost as if it's about to start rusting, but without there being rust. I use this technique a lot. And what you can do is once it's dry, you could also have a dry brush technical paint or any orange paint colour and apply a rust effect over the top. It's really quite nice, it does work well. So here are the finished hinges and metalwork. It's looking quite good. Now we're going to paint the vines. This is a nightmare. These vines actually feel like they're growing. As you're painting them, you see another one just sticking around the corner of the brick. And even though the doors are the same and the arches are the same, the vines just seem to change, they seem to grow. And just when you think they're all done, you'll spot another one. And you can't say it's a crack because it's sticking out from the wall. It doesn't work. It seemed like I was painting these for hours when I was doing this. Obviously it wasn't that long, but still, I don't want to do them again. So now we're going to apply a little bit of brown wash over the top of the vines just to try and give them a bit more depth. I could sit here and paint them with a shadow colour mid-tone and a highlight, but that's not the aim of this series. It's to use the wash, let the wash do all the work. So you can see it stains them. I could put more time and effort into that. I could go back over the top, apply a few highlights, maybe a few base tones on there to help bring those vines out, but there's no real need. No one's going to be looking at them dead close. They're all going to be 2-3 foot away whilst they're playing the game. So now we're going to move on to something special. I deliberately left one door with the undercoat, and Previously I had been experimenting with the technique that Artis Opus have been doing with their dry brush series, and some vibrant colours, and we're going to use their tutorial to apply a similar methodology to the doors. We're going to do a couple of different types of glow here. We're going to do a green glow and we're going to do a blue glow. Now unfortunately I lost the first bit of video showing where I was doing the painting of this first initial colour, and the idea is you work from the bottom up. Doesn't really make much difference whether you go bottom up or top down in this particular case, because the doors are so small, but on larger pieces of scenery you might want to just follow that rule. So the idea is, as you're looking at it from the base, it'll look dark; as you look at it from the top, it will look bright. Shadows and highlights, but all applied with the dry brush. So just going over the colour again, just to bring out the vibrancy and make sure the saturation is there with the colour, because this one, when it dulls, as with any paint, when it dries it goes a little bit duller. The idea is we're taking the darker colours to around about halfway, the darkest being at the very bottom, working to almost like a mid-tone in the middle of the door. One thing you want to make sure when you switch colours is that your brush is completely clean of the previous colour. This is not the time when you want to be blending colours. You need to have them completely independent. So now I've switched and I'm doing a greenish colour here. I think it was Scurvy Green by Game Colour, Vallejo. And we're taking our brush strokes from top to bottom. Right, now that the mid-tone is out of the way, we're going to move on to the highlight colours. So the first one is the green shade. Again, same technique, working from the top, coming down to about halfway. Take your time, don't try and put too much colour on at one time, and you'll see that I'm deliberately avoiding going up into the very tip of the door. Obviously there's a natural shadow there, so you don't want to be pushing the paint up too high underneath the keystone. I'm also taking the colour a little bit further down, because whilst we are supposed to be working at the top half, obviously light travels down. I've even put some on the floor, because the floor would pick up some of the natural light as well. Now we're going to add some of the yellow highlight colour on the top. Again, just working our way down, trying to pick out some of the more exposed edges, and this will start to really make it pop. We're also going to take it down to the floor, just stippling and just stabbing at the exposed areas, trying not to get too much onto the dark and disguise what we've already done. The final thing that we're going to do to this particular paint scheme is we're going to use the technical paint Tesseract Glow, and we are going to put this onto very, very selected areas, and you'll see how it instantly makes the glow brighter. You need to be very sparing with this. The last thing you want to do is go over everything that you've done and make everything glow. So work your way down the door, picking out selected areas. It's almost random what I'm doing, but I'm trying to select areas that might be the most prominent, the most exposed. Even on the dark areas there on that hinge, it's just to show that there is a light glowing down onto those items, almost like an object source lighting. Picking out the vine and then some of the flagstones at the bottom. So here are some photos of the finished doors, including the other glow type that I was talking about, the blue glow. Unfortunately, that was part of the footage that I lost, so I don't have that to be able to show you. I might pick it up in the future, but again, if you just follow the same principles with dark colours at the bottom, lighter colours at the top, dry brushing in the direction of that light or shadow, and you will achieve what you want to achieve. I'd be interested to see what you guys can produce. Thanks for joining me on this video. It was really fun to experiment with the colours, very Castle Grayskull-ish. If you like what you've seen, press the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends, and otherwise I will see you in the next video. Bye.